coming up.
I know it's not a term that anyone here has created, and it's something that has been accepted by pretty well everybody, but the term phobia means to be afraid of something, and then it's to be afraid of Islam and to be afraid of Muslims. That is, in essence, a bit of a problem. Nonetheless, I know it's a topic for another time. So, sir, I'm going to give you that time right now to comment on that.
Budget 2024 included $7.3 million in funding over 6 years to support the work which you are doing. So could you please outline what you see as the next action?
I do think it's important for us to remember there's a long tradition of policing women in their dress in this country. But what do you see as different about this now?
I'd like to hear your opinion. Why do you think we should allow fomenting hate or anti-Semitism as long as it's based on religious text? Point of order, Madam Chair.
Like and subscribe.
I know it's not a term that anyone here has created, and it's something that has been accepted by pretty well everybody, but the term phobia means to be afraid of something, and then it's to be afraid of Islam and to be afraid of Muslims. That is, in essence, a bit of a problem. Nonetheless, I know it's a topic for another time. So, sir, I'm going to give you that time right now to comment on that. And just for further context, I did notice in your opening remarks that you did use the term fear a couple of times in association to Islam.
Honor, if I had a magic wand, I'd remove this word, but I do not. And it's a term that's been accepted and used by everyone. So it's a term that I have to kind of use as well to kind of drive home the fact that this particular issue exists. Do I wish it wasn't called islamophobia? Yes, but again, I don't think I can do much about that right now.
Okay, would you have a better term?
No, I'm not necessarily a wordsmith, but anything other than, throwing in the word Islam or Muslim. When we say anti-Semitism, being a Semite, there's others, including, my family that are Semites as well. So anti-Semitic is a term that doesn't necessarily reference hate towards the Jewish faith, which is rightly so. It shouldn't be that. But this particular term does kind of bring that up, and unfortunately, it's just something that we can't change right now, right? It's a term that's used everywhere throughout media and journalism.
There have been 2 cases recently of attacks on people, Canadians, just because they were Muslim and identified as such. One was the Quebec City mosque shooting, and the other was the terrorist attack in London, Ontario, 3 years ago. We marked that anniversary just a couple of days ago. So in both cases, the perpetrator was charged and convicted of murder. But in the London case, the person was also charged and convicted on terrorism charges, but not in the Quebec City mosque case. And I wonder why not. And what are your comments on that? How important is it to have added charges relating to terrorism when it didn't at all add to the sentence that the person will serve?
Madam Chair, I'd like to thank the member for his question. First, I just want to, for the committee, regarding the definition of Islamophobia, just so that we're all clear, before I get to the answer. Islamophobia is the racism, stereotypes, prejudice, fear, or acts of hostility directed towards individual Muslims or followers of Islam in general. In addition to individual acts of intolerance and racial profiling, Islamophobia can lead to viewing and treating Muslims as a greater security threat on an institutional, systemic, and societal level. And so it offers me a bit of a way into the answer here. It's very clear that when the shooter in Quebec City entered the mosque, he had a very clear intention to kill as many Muslims as he could, given that he had been consuming harmful, dangerous narratives about Muslims for some time. He was reacting to what he perceived as, Canada being welcoming of Muslims, and based on these very dangerous ideas about the threat, as per the definition, that Muslims pose to him and his family and his community, he decided to act out. That terrorized the community. It terrorized Quebec Muslims. It terrorized Muslims across Canada and fellow Canadians who are absolutely rightfully shocked by what happened. The fact that similarly in the London attack, the terrorist who went and rammed his truck into a family simply because, again, they were Muslim and he had consumed dangerous narratives, he also terrorized. It is very important that the justice system recognizes when there is an act that is terrorist, because it sends a very strong message that not only were they targeted as individuals, as Canadians, part of our society, but they were specifically targeted with an ideological motive in place. And so the ideological motive is indeed to send a message about the place of Muslims in this country, whether or not they belong. It was a message that was very, very painful for many, and we continue to carry it. Thank you.
Budget 2024 included 7.3 million in funding over 6 years to support the work which you are doing. So could you please outline what you see as the next action steps beyond the National Summit and your activities to address the alarming increase in Islamophobia, especially in the last few months?
So, Madam Chair, I thank the member for her excellent question. Absolutely, since the National Summit on Islamophobia, which was convened following the tragic terrorist attack in London, Ontario, the federal government has indeed followed up on various recommendations that were made at the summit, 35% of which have been followed up on, according to the Anti-Racism Secretariat, and which has been communicated to communities. Now, along with the creation of my office, what I have attempted to identify is the need to support the government on 3 key outcomes for Muslims in Canada. That Muslims in Canada can live lives of dignity that is free of discrimination, that Muslims are free from exposure of hate both on and offline, and that Muslims working in our federal public service do not face bias and discrimination. And so my role is to provide advice, guidance, it's to raise awareness and education. In the past year, before the tragic events of October 7th and onwards, we had already committed to launching a guide on how law enforcement can address anti-Muslim hate crimes in our communities. It was launched in September of last year. It's the OSCE Practical Guide. We also launched a digital toolkit for Islamic History Month to highlight the incredible resilience of Muslim women and girls who have sadly faced gendered Islamophobia, as many know, and which highlighted efforts of Edmonton Muslim women to highlight the work that they're doing to ensure that their communities remain safe. And so we continue to provide this type of advice and work. We are also have been undertaking studies of how young people are faring in our country since October 7th, in which to provide support to the government in understanding the crucial issue of belonging and the need for the federal government to ensure that all communities, and in particular Muslim communities who face discrimination and bias, that our young people are assured that they do belong, that they have the mental health support they require, and that all of our institutions address the concerns that they continue to raise.
Thank you. My next question is for Ms. Hassan. Could you please talk about your perspective as a professor about the student protests against the war in Gaza at York University, the response of the administration, and how York has handled the larger issue of Islamophobia on campus and as well as in academia?
Thank you so much for the question, MP Zahid. I think student protests are such an amazing phenomenon in Canadian history when it comes to standing up for issues related to social justice. It's something that's such an enriching part of our democracy. It's something that has, we've seen again and again throughout Canadian history the way student protests can lead to real change in the right direction. What we've seen at York, just very recently, there were a student encampment set up just for, I think, maybe 24 hours. And it's all very new because this happened last week. But the administration did forcibly remove the encampments with the involvement of the police. And we're seeing many, and York's not the only one, we've seen many university administrations in many different jurisdictions in Canada taking the bizarre approach of criminalizing student protest, which I think is having a really chilling effect on students. it's important to remember that these encampments have been largely peaceful protests, and they're not a new phenomenon. Encampments as a form of protest have been happening against poverty, homelessness, tuition hikes, war. So it's not something new, and I think we all need to ask some questions, and important questions about why these particular ones are being clamped down and criminalized with such force in so many campuses around the country. Like the student right to protest and the culture of dissent and protest and critique and critical thinking is at stake, in my opinion.
Thank you. You also touched upon in your testimony about Bill 21. So could you please explain how Bill 21 creates systemic discrimination?
I'm actually, over the last 3 years, I've been conducting a study on the impact of Bill 21, specifically on the experiences of Muslim women in their workplaces and in their experiences in searching for a job. So this is very much about Muslim women's livelihoods, their ability to actually work and live in Quebec. And what we found, and I can give you sort of a preview of those findings, is really quite stunning. Muslim women are 4 times more likely to experience physical violence and aggression at their workplace.
We live in a society that has quite often historically tried to police dress of women and tried to blame women for things that happen to them because of dress choices they make. And while I'm not trying to reduce the salience of what's happening with Muslim women now, I do think it's important for us to remember there's a long tradition of policing women and their dress in this country. But what do you see as different about this now than that kind of traditional concern about the way women look and dress?
Well, I think now we've legalized our ability to discriminate against women who dress a certain way. And discriminate not in an insignificant way. This is their livelihoods that we're talking about. These are their investments in their careers that have just vanished because of a law that says that they can't work in certain public sector jobs. I think the impact of this has been felt far and wide by Muslim women in Quebec, and my research shows that it has been so detrimental to not only Muslim women's livelihoods, but their mental health, their ability to feel like they belong, that they're safe or secure in Quebec. Muslim women report feeling like they're targeted and that they're in the crosshairs of kind of becoming political punching bags in Quebec, and they're kind of dreading what the Quebec government is going to do next to take away their rights. As a result, my studies found that over 73% of Muslim women in Quebec are considering leaving the province altogether. So this is not okay. Like, this is not what we call social harmony. It completely flies in the face of the fact that the Quebec government is essentially trying to promote the bill as something that is enabling social harmony. It is not. The violence women are experiencing, the mental distress, the threats to their personal, physical safety and security is at stake right now.
And I know that your research is focused on Quebec, but do you see this having impacts outside of the province of Quebec?
Absolutely. And I think as we're talking about, especially the current moment that we're in, we're seeing many Islamophobic attacks are actually directed at Muslim women that wear a hijab. And these are attacks that range from Muslim women having their hijab ripped off, being physically assaulted, like punched in the head, punched in the stomach, Muslim women being spat on, which is a wildly common phenomenon since last fall. So it's actually quite atrocious what Muslim women in particular are facing. And Islamophobia is gendered in very, very significant and important ways that I think it would be wise for this committee to remember as you think about what your next steps are going to be.
And I'd like to ask Madam Al-Ghamwabi to weigh in on the same question in her work. How is she finding the question of gender affecting the ability to combat Islamophobia?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you to the member, Madam Chair. It's a very important question, absolutely. As Dr. Hassan has noted, Muslim women who wear the headscarf or visible are indeed targeted in various ways, whether it's discrimination on the job, whether it's discrimination from holding various types of employment right across Canada. This is a phenomenon. We actually see the underemployment of Muslim women within Canadian employment areas, even though they have a very high level of education. It's not matching up to the types of employment that they're able to get. And so what we realize then is Canada is losing an incredible opportunity to benefit from the incredible professional attainment that these women can have. The contributions they can have in our society are huge. And so when we think about the ways in which this study can provide advice, it is indeed to be very mindful of the fact that there are all sorts of stereotypes that exist around Muslim women, and particularly those who choose to wear the head covering, the hijab. And what I have heard from women across the country, including in Quebec, is again, not only is this Law 21 impacting women in particular professions, i.e. in teaching and in the legal profession, but it has sort of an impact that sets out right through the society. Because the moment that you have what has been termed to this committee second-class citizenship, where some people have less rights than others, immediately that gives license to those that may hold discriminatory views the permission to treat these citizens differently than others. And so this is an extremely problematic pathway that Canada is on, and harms our social cohesion, but also our prosperity and our success.
No matter what your religion is or your beliefs are, at the moment fomenting hate is against the law, but there is an exception in the law that says that you can have a defense if your speech is based on a religious text. So in my opinion, this doesn't make sense, but do you agree with me that we should eliminate the exception there? I'd like to hear your opinion. Why do you think we should allow fomenting hate or anti-Semitism as long as it's based on religious text? Point of order, Madam Chair. I did not hear a link there. I have great respect for the member opposite, but there is no link in the question to our study. So I'm asking you as chair, is there a direct link between the question and the study? Thank you for the point of order. I believe Mr. Fortin has finished his question and I stopped the time. Did you finish your question? Do you want an answer now or are you continuing? I need an answer before I can continue. If you're done, you have 39 seconds left. The point of order is moot. I'm not sure I understand your question, but I did finish asking my question. I was waiting for the answer. If you would like, I can respond to Mr. Zuberi's argument. Okay, I don't think we should spend much time on this point of order because we are almost finished. Yes. And in any case, we've been listening to testimony for a few days. It seems to me that hate is at the heart of this debate. Witnesses raise the issue of hate, so I don't really see how this would make sense. The point of order would make sense. Okay, thank you. Please, we have 39 seconds left. I would like to hear Ms. El-Gawabi's answer with 39 seconds left on the clock. Thank you. Madam Chair.
So again, I think what's clear, and it's quite sad and unfortunate that Muslims are constantly asked to condemn hate. Of course, Muslims join fellow Canadians in condemning all forms of hate. The underlying premise of the question suggests that somehow Muslim communities or other religious minority communities are fomenting hate.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Point of order.
I think I can continue to finish.
Would you prefer not to answer? You have 9 seconds. You haven't answered. You just said Muslims shouldn't have to answer. Okay, thank you. Time is up. Thanks anyway, Ms. Al-Gawawi.
2.5 seconds, please. 2.5 minutes. I wish.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to say once again, as a gay man who's often been othered in our society, and as a gay man who's married to a person of color who's often presumed to be Muslim because of his nationality, I have some personal experience with what we see just going on here, that questions are asked of Muslims that are not asked of anyone else. And it's part of what I think all our witnesses have said. There's somehow extra test of loyalty or commitment to diversity that we demand of Muslims who appear before us. And I'm disturbed by that. So I'm really not sure what to ask at this point.